Welcome to episode 13 of the COO's Corner podcast, the podcast exploring success factors in the world of business operations. And my name is Tamar Nelson, your host and a specialist in the area of operational resilience. And today we are exploring the topic, how to glide over challenges and rapidly innovate. Challenges seem to be on a high these days. No individual, team, or organization is spared or immune to it. We must all face them. Where can we find the best solutions? Past performance, mimicking the competition, or best industry practice, or something totally different. Today, we're going to crack the code and unleash the superpowers that we all have with Paul Daniels. Paul is the founder and CEO of Peripheral Thinkers, a collaborative think tank where entrepreneurs, business owners, and corporate leaders learn, share, and apply lessons that propel their companies beyond obstacles and change the trajectory of industry worldwide. His 40-year career spans more than two, and by the way, he doesn't look a day over 40. His 40-day career spans more than 24 industries in 30 countries, solving some of the biggest problems for companies like General Electric, United Healthcare, WebMD, and AT&T. Paul is a contributing author to the latest Peak Performance book series, Mindset Tools for Entrepreneurs, scheduled to release in May of this year, so we need to stay tuned. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Tamar, it's great to be here. Long-time listener, first-time guest. Thank you.
Oh boy, it's a pleasure. And I remember when you reached out to me, I think it was a quote that I had shared by Albert Einstein.
Yes.
The important thing is not to stop questioning, never to lose holy curiosity. And if you know me, I'm a lover of quotes, and I'm a very curious one.
Yes.
So we're happy to have you here, Paul.
Thank you.
And on this podcast, Paul, this is a space where we speak about all things operations and growth, whether on the business or on individual level. And I know, one of the things that you believe is that we were all born with a set of superpowers just waiting to be unleashed.
Right.
What are these? Is curiosity one of them? And how can they help us in life and in business?
Yeah, right. So a little bit of my backstory. During school, I was told that I was lazy, dumb, a daydreamer. And that followed me through university, even into my professional career. And it was at age 40 that I realized that I was diagnosed with dyslexia. Now, it's interesting because even at that age, people were still questioning, Paul, you're not quite the same as everyone else. You don't think the same. And you come up with these ideas that are hard to grasp. Why do you do this? Just fit in. As soon as I figured out that I was dyslexic, then I began to research that. And it's only in the last several years that we've actually cracked the code to this dyslexic superpowers that come innately within people that have neurodiversity. So if you look at history throughout history, some of the most prolific innovators, from business pioneers to world-class athletes, are and have been dyslexic. From Einstein, which is your quote, to Henry Ford, Anne Bancroft, JFK, Da Vinci, Aaron Brockovich, Richard Branson, Muhammad Ali, Agatha Christie. All of them were dyslexic, and they took their roles to new heights, and in some cases created new industries. These super skills that I talk about are a mirror to the super skills that are found in dyslexic innovators. And I call them peripheral thinking. And so for the last more than a decade, almost 2 decades, I've been coaching companies using those skills, and more recently teaching them how to learn and apply them themselves. These skills, yeah, go ahead, Tamar.
Oh, so you're saying that some are born with it, but others can learn it, right?
Absolutely.
So break it down for us, Paul. How can peripheral thinking really help us in life or in business?
So peripheral thinking is a set of super skills, and there's one that all dyslexic innovators have in common that is the easiest to learn and apply. In fact, we can do that in 5 minutes. Should we do it now?
Go right ahead.
Okay, great. So if you're listening to this and you're driving, don't do this. Just imagine that you do this. But if you're watching, then I really encourage you to try this. All right, so imagine that you're in a mountain field, and that mountain field is covered with wildflowers. The sun is warm on your face, the air is crisp and it's cool. And as you look out on that mountain field, there's your challenge, rising like a monolith out of the flowers. Okay, got that image?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to do something unusual. We're going to cover our eye. So take your hand and cover your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Now you can't see what's right in front of you, but what can you see? Well, you can move your eyes up, to the left, to the right, down. In fact, if you're doing this, find something that you haven't noticed before. Wherever you are, something that you haven't noticed before. You got it?
Yep.
Okay, great. You can take your hand down.
All right.
Okay, so for me, it was a small spot on the wall of my office. I've been in this office a long time. Just now noticed that spot.
Right.
That's peripheral vision. Everyone understands peripheral vision. Now, if you look at what you hadn't seen before, so Tamar, what did you see that you hadn't noticed before?
I still have a bag in the corner there. All right.
Yeah. Okay, right, great. So you can look at that, and now it's more detailed, it's more vivid. You can see it because you're staring at it.
Yes.
That's peripheral awareness. So we go back to the mountain field, and you imagine that challenge in front of you. This time, imagine moving to the right, say 100 yards. In your imagination, what does that new vantage point uncover about your challenge? Well, likely you see more details, maybe the depth of that monolith. And you can do that same thing by walking all the way around in your mind that challenge. 360-degree review, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a team, COOs, you've got a team, you can take your team with you and walk around that challenge and get a view of what is keeping you from your goals. The problem is that that's still from your perspective.
Right. That's what I was just going to say. It's still my vantage point. It's still
right.
My thinking. It's not
correct.
A full 360 if it's
right.
my.
And even with the team, you
right.
can use it's the team's perhaps collective experiences.
Exactly.
So we'll go back to that position some 100 yards to the right. And this time, instead of looking at your challenge, turn the other way and imagine looking around. Now, what do you see? Well, likely there are other objects, maybe different terrain, and there are people. But these people aren't part of your team. They're not part of your network. They're not even part of your industry.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not looking at your challenge. They have their own. They've overcome challenges. They've reached goals. Their perspective may be just what your company needs as inspiration for your innovation. See, when we go into the periphery, shedding our own perspectives in search of new solutions, ideas, perspectives, we engage in peripheral thinking. And what we did in the mountain field is a skill called interpreting. Interpreting takes different ideas and solutions that are not related, and it combines them in unique ways to create something new. Now, it's often that people will say, I get the idea, and I like new ideas as long as they help me get places, but people are also risk averse. Generally, right? And thinking differently can feel risky. But without say the motivation from a global pandemic or some major market shift, how will people find new ideas that aren't conventional, that aren't industry best practices? Who will deliver them new solutions and perspectives? How will the industry transform? Who will bring those things? Well, Tamar, you will. You will. And hear me on this. You can, because you can challenge convention more than you already do. Be curious like you are. Find low risk paths to growth and achieve big goals in any marketplace when you know where and how to look. The dyslexic innovator thinks globally. An example of that, when JFK said, you know what, we're going to put a person on the moon by the end of the decade. Conventional wisdom said, you're going to do what? Peripheral thinking said, okay, let's get busy. You may not know this, but about 10% of people are born with dyslexia. 20 to 30% of entrepreneurs, nearly 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. NASA actively recruits people with dyslexia.
Never knew that.
And MIT has actually coined the phrase that dyslexia is the MIT disease, because there are so many dyslexics that are in MIT.
Wow.
Nearly 50% of the people at NASA are dyslexic.
Wow. So going, you said so many, wonderful things just now. Shedding your perspectives, our own perspectives, is what's going to help us to innovate, right? And it reminds me of something that I read the other day. It says, to grow, you have to lose something. And, one of those things is actually shedding, our paradigms that we have held on to for decades that are definitely not working in this environment of great disruptions. So, we have to think differently, and having new thinking or expanding our thinking to what's on the periphery would definitely help us. But what would you say to someone, Paul, that's listening in, saying, this is great, but how do I really do this? This sounds like it will take a lot of time to do as well.
Right.
What's the first step? How do I go about this?
Well, like any good change, the first step is acknowledging where you are. And when we look at clients that we work with, it's not uncommon for us to talk about challenges like this. You have a challenge, and the natural approach is for your mind to look at that challenge, like we just discussed, maybe a 360-degree review. Our mind looks beyond the challenge to the goal that's keeping us from reaching that goal. And we look at that goal and the measurements and so on. We go, okay, so that's where I'm trying to go. This is the challenge. Now, I look to my past. What have I done in the past that has overcome these kinds of challenges or has been helpful? So I check my references, my history, and then I look at the current environment. What are my colleagues doing? What are my competitors doing? What industry trends are out there? And all of that informs my approach to overcoming this challenge. That's logical. It's conventional. It's common, right? You plan your work, you work your plan.
Yeah.
That is not what industry leaders and innovators do. They have a different process because they have different perspectives. So to begin that process is first to recognize that approach is part of maybe your industry's best practices. And at what point do your industry's best practices actually reinforce the narrow view of conventional wisdom? When you embrace that, then you can shed that and start looking around. I honestly believe this after doing, for 40 years and $2.5 billion in new revenue. that every element to the solution you need to overcome the challenge you're facing already exists. It already exists. You just need to know where and how to look. The where to look is everywhere. Look everywhere. At your Starbucks, in the conversation that you have on a podcast, in anywhere that you go, offers opportunities for you to see something from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
And the how to is with an open, curious, and interpreting mind. So I have an example. In 2010, I was working with a hospital in the Midwest. It was early in 2010. I remember this because it was so cold. And we'd finished up this meeting, a couple of days strategy session, and the last session that we had was on this interpreting skill. I was talking with the director of the patient engagement department, and they were scheduling to do more advertising and patient surveys, a bunch of common things to improve their satisfaction and their ranking as the hospital of choice. She said that she couldn't meet with me the next week because she was taking her family on vacation to Hawaii. So we rescheduled. I went back to Texas, and sure enough, I got a call late night on Sunday, and it was from, we'll call her Jennifer Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And she was so excited. She said, I've got to show you. I get it. This whole peripheral thinking thing. I get it. So hang on. I want to read you this text I just got. Okay. It says, Ms. Johnson, thanks for choosing the Waikoloa Village Resort. If there's anything I can do to make your stay exceptional, call me. And Paul, it's from the general manager. He gave me his personal number. Do you get it? I said, that's a great message. I've been to the property. They know a terrific guest experience. She says, my point exactly. What if we did the same thing for guests, patients in my hospital? Oh, yeah. She gets it because there was a proven solution in another industry, low risk, with direct application to patients in her hospital, high immediate implication or immediate implementation. That was, you can think of it now because it happens a lot in 2022. You get these kinds of electronic messages from doctors and whatnot. In 2010, it wasn't there. She was the impetus for starting that. And she's now the chief patient experience officer of a 20 hospital health system.
Right.
She was in Hawaii. Something hit. She was thinking and went, why can't I do that here?
You know, that reminded me, in the last podcast that our guest encouraged us to surround ourselves with good people with different perspectives so we can have healthy debates, and to look in other industries for, ways of doing things better or to innovate in our own space. And right now you're saying that this applies to the peripheral thinking model. It
is. It is exactly what, the peripheral thinking model is based on an image of the 8 super skills found innately within dyslexics. So our mind as a dyslexic, we're already there. I'm gathering all of this information all the time, and I'm collecting it. And the neuro pathways to all of that is difficult to create the neuro pathways, but we've created tools like the Peripheral Resource Library that allow you to document these kinds of things just quickly, document them, and then use that library and this interpreting, one piece of the interpreting skill to weave your way through all of the resources you have at your beck and call to overcome a challenge or to reach a goal. Right.
So you had a a 4-step model. I think it was 4 steps in terms of how to apply peripheral thinking: contact, context, content, and connect. Could you quickly just share that with our audience?
Sure. Absolutely. So there are 6 C's in the interpreting skill, and I'll do them briefly. And if you want more information, I'll just connect with me and ask for the Peripheral Resource Library and mention this podcast, and I'll send you a free copy of that. No strings attached. I'm not going to, bomb you with sales calls or anything. Just send it because of Tamar and her great podcast. You can have access to this. The first C is contact. Go and find people outside your industry. Contact them, get to know them, let them get to know you. Now, a word of caution for those people that are very social. If you're on LinkedIn or Facebook in groups and communities, it's likely it's about your job or your interests or your industry. Mm-hmm. This is not the periphery. You need to find fresh perspectives. Find something completely different. I call it the baker in Bulgaria. Actually, I have a contact. His name is Ivan, and he is a baker in Bulgaria. And I don't speak his language. He doesn't speak mine, but we connect, we talk through Google Translate. So that's the first C. The second C is context. Just get the backstory. What's it like for your contact? How did they get into business? What's their environment like? It's really just a snapshot of what it's like in that environment. And it gives context to the third C, which is content. This is where you learn from your contact what's working, what's not working, and why. These are lessons. These are approaches, processes, principles, and solutions. The fourth C is conclusion. What are the measurable results of the content? About what's working and what's not working? That's the conclusion. And then there's a category. You can give that category. Let's say the conclusion was to grow the business 2x. And so you achieved 2x growth, your baker in Bulgaria. So now you're going to give it a category. We'll call it growth or expansion or, I don't know, survival, whatever that is. And then the sixth C is the secret sauce. The secret sauce is connecting the dots. The sixth C is how you use the first five, and the first five make up that peripheral resource library. Connecting the dots is taking your original goal and the results of that original goal that you want to achieve. Maybe that is growing your business twice, 2x. So the conclusion of your goal is 2x revenue. The category might be growth or whatever. You take the category and the conclusion and you search your resource library for similar entries. And then you reference the content, the lessons, the principles, and so on. Because you need those fresh perspectives. They may not look exactly like what you want to do. They may have done something and achieved a goal, but it is uncommon for your industry. Yeah. That's where you break away from the business best practices and you accept the elements as fact. They did grow their business. They did overcome this challenge. They did reduce costs. They did find better people. They were able to retain their best people, whatever that is. Find multiple perspectives because you need multiple entries in order to play with them and say, can I align that principle to overcome the challenge that I have in front of me?
Wow.
That makes sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Oh, good. Good.
Because that's the only way we're going to think outside the box, right? By having fresh perspectives. And where are we going to get those fresh perspectives is from different people, different countries, different cultures. Yes. And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast in the pandemic was, to help COOs to find fresh perspectives from persons like themselves in other areas, other industries, who have superpowers and have been, achieving great results as a result of those superpowers. So it has been done. Why not learn from others and apply it, in your own space? Exactly. So this is a great way of doing that. And it doesn't
have to be an industry or another COO. There's a gentleman I meet with about every 3 weeks at Home Depot. He's a retired executive, and and he works in the hardware area, the nuts and bolts and screws and stuff. His name's Mike. And we just talk about golf or whatever he wants to talk about for 5 or 10 minutes. I always walk away thinking, I wonder if I could apply what he just said to my client's challenge. I wonder what's there.
Yeah.
So I've learned a ton from wait staff at a restaurant to Mike at Home Depot to people in 24 industries in almost 30 countries.
Absolutely. I always say to others that it's, you can learn from everyone, right? And in Jamaica, we have a lot of street vendors, and you sometimes stand on the road and just have a conversation while, you buy a hot dog or have a cup of soup.
Yeah.
And it's always some great conversations.
Yes.
and you're like, wow, and you leave inspired, you leave, motivated and with a new fresh perspective on things. So it's always good to talk to people outside of your own field or industry and learn fresh perspectives. Another thing that I have experienced too is learning something new gives a new fresh perspective.
Absolutely.
I got my diver's license a few months ago.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, and it was amazing. And let me tell you, just chatting with the boat captain and hear how he speaks about leadership. And I'm like, wow. And to see the applications, for example, one of the things in diving is breathing is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And how to breathe through difficult times, not to get too excited if something happened, but to think rationally. Those are things that apply. Or not diving by yourself, but diving with a buddy and having that buddy system. So you see, how you can apply it to your own leadership, your own teams, so it's so important.
Absolutely. You have a keynote speech right there, learning to dive and the lessons of leadership. That's exactly right.
Wow.
There are so many analogies and lessons out there. I just want to encourage your audience to, if you're not comfortable meeting other people, that's okay. It's okay to learn from a book. You can learn firsthand or secondhand, and you can apply. You can start adding things to your peripheral library right now, today. In fact, I take people through an exercise of just revisiting a fond childhood memory. And it's before I explain the peripheral thinking, peripheral resource library. And then we come back and they go, oh gosh, we just already did that. Yeah, you've already got your first entry. And then I share a story about myself, and now you've got another one. Now you've got another one. You've got 3 or 4. And now look at all the people in this room. Just imagine all the lessons that are available to you right now in this room. If you took an hour, 10 minutes with each person, goodness, 6 people could provide input that is beyond your wildest imagination, that can apply today. There are more answers than questions. There are more paths than problems. There are more choices than challenges, and more opportunities than obstacles when you know where and how to look. And now you know where and how to look. Okay, so that was a little more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's a mic drop right there. That's a tweetable moment, guys.
There you go.
So, Paul, what is one myth about peripheral thinking that you'd want to debunk? What's one myth that something that you always hear persons when you speak about this concept?
Sure. There's this, especially when I reference some of the peripheral thinkers that are name recognizable. Mm-hmm. I'm no Einstein. I'm no Richard Branson. That is absolutely a myth, that you don't need creativity and imagination. Yes, those are part of peripheral thinking. Mm-hmm. But let's be clear, everybody can create. To create is to cause something to happen because of someone's actions. So you, listener, created a way to watch or listen to this podcast. So you're already creative. Interpreting or peripheral thinking just imagines how you can take ideas or input from unrelated sources and creatively apply them to new things. Peripheral thinking takes information from unlikely sources, combines them, massages them, and applies them in unique ways. When you do that, anything is possible. Wow. So my quote that I live by is, you have access to everything you need to achieve anything you want. And now you know where and how to look for that. There are other skills on how to apply and other things that I'm happy to, talk with people about. But for today, that's probably enough. Maybe I blew some minds. Maybe I didn't. Others are thinking, gosh, I do that all the time. Good for you. Expand your resources. Go further because it's out there. Everything that you can imagine that you need today or tomorrow is out there. Don't be shy. Go get it.
Wow. And I think that goes into my next question that I have in terms of because you actually help teams and organizations go through this process to look differently and see differently and see the opportunities that can help them to innovate. What's one common mistake that you are seeing in organizations today? What's the number one mistake that is being made?
There's, and I've seen this my entire career in entrepreneurial ventures and working for, global 500 companies. There is a tendency to focus on one's industry in order to achieve that goal. Maybe it is the industry leadership or industry leader, or maybe it's a new position in that industry. I want to be in Gartner Group's Magic Quadrant, whatever that is. And the misconception is that I need to follow or apply the same approaches as those people that are in the Magic Quadrant. If you look at disruptors, if you look at people that truly change an industry, often they come from outside of that industry. I'm working with a small organization. I'm on the board of directors of a couple of companies. I'm meeting with a gentleman from New Zealand on Thursday, last Thursday. And his perspective from one industry and owning a company that didn't have software to support it created the genesis of software, not for that same industry, but for other industries, similar, but different. And he's now in 17 countries.
Wow.
In 3 years, 17 countries.
Wow.
Because everything is on the table. Nothing's out. Oh, no, that's not part of our manufacturing industry. So we can't do that. The biggest mistake is we all grew up with a parent or a grandparent or someone that grabbed our cheek and said, "You're special, you're unique, you're a one of a kind." And that may be true, but not in business. So if you think that's the case and you're special and you need to do what is happening, this, industry best practices for your business, you're following the best practices of everyone else. So where's the differentiation, right? Some best practices, absolutely. You've got to follow the correct financial practices and operational best practices. I get all of that. But really, how do you differentiate? It's by going outside of your current track and finding how other people are doing it in industries that have nothing to do with you. So I asked my clients, what does a baker in Bulgaria have to do with a foundry outside of Philadelphia? What does a movie theater in Malaysia have in common with a distribution center in Denver? What does a flu in China have to do with unemployment around the world? Now, conventional wisdom says they don't have a lot in common. Peripheral thinking says, oh, hang on. They may have a lot more in common than you think. There may be some ideas here that we could apply. And off you go.
Yeah. So
does that answer the question?
It answers it 100%.
Okay, good.
I can hear the heads and see the heads nodding, listening to you just speak just now with those examples. It really brought the point home. So, in what has been the results that you have seen with companies that have taken this journey of embarking on peripheral thinking? What do their innovations look like? What does their growth look like in a year or 2 or 5 years? Share with us your experience.
Sure. So there was a healthcare system, a healthcare insurance company that I worked with years ago. And their challenge as a company was to raise capital to go after a very large account, the AARP account. So an insurance company getting AARP was guaranteed to generate billions of dollars for them. And they needed money they needed to raise some capital for what's called a war chest, which is basically to fund the initiative to campaign to win that business. Well, our solution we weren't in financing. We were in IT outsourcing. But by tying the need of the client, along with a couple of other financial approaches, we were able to win that business, provide $20 million in immediate savings, which they turned around and in 18 months, turned it into $1.2 billion in annual revenue. Wow. Annual revenue.
Wow.
Right. And I used the principle, ready for this? I used the principle of right of first refusal from the real estate industry. My wife and I had been looking for some property in Texas, and we came across a piece of land that wasn't for sale, but we found who the owner was, and we spent some time with him, sitting on his front porch, drinking iced tea like you do in Texas.
Yeah.
And it was then that I learned about this first right of refusal, which means, look, if it's amicable for both of us, I would like to be the first person, if you choose to sell the land, that you contact. And we can talk about pricing now, we can save it for later, whatever, but I just want to be first in line. And so when I went to meet with the executive at this insurance company, I did the same thing. I think I know what you're looking for. I just need to be first one in line, because we don't have time for this to be a very competitive environment. And of course, they're very large, and they would have done an RFP and a bunch of other things.
Right.
But I was able to create a letter of intent, which looked a lot like right of first refusal. And in the first meeting, I walked out with a letter of intent. 6 months later, the deal was signed. So I'm not saying that to brag or anything. I'm just pointing out that I used a real estate principle to attract the attention and capture their interest of this client. And then they've been a client of mine, ever since, not in that perspective, but on the consulting side. I help them take things from other industries and apply them in unique ways to remain one of the top insurance companies in the country and the world.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I'm sure that a lot of persons will be looking that up and seeing how they can apply the right of first refusal to their own system, right, as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so we had no competition. It was competition free, and that's how we did it in 6 months.
Right. So you save on time, save on costs, increase your, short your turnaround time, and so many wins right there.
Exactly. I knew I needed to in order to meet it, that this is what I had to do. And the team, executed perfectly, and they were terrific. And client have been ever since.
Wow. So you have a lifelong client as well. Look at that.
Yeah,
many
right.
benefits to your ladies and gentlemen. So you have shared a lot of things with us. But what are the best resources that are out there that can help COOs or C-suite or organizations in their growth journey?
Yeah, I don't want to seem flippant on this response, but the best tools that a COO has is the gray matter between her or his ears. It's here. It really is here. Yes, read the Wall Street Journal. Sure. Read Harvard Business Review. Sure. Apply to and listen and read the magazines that are your industry's magazines. But when you expand this and go to Hawaii and experience something, go to Jamaica and talk to a street vendor, right? That's where the real growth happens. Truly, that's where the real growth happens. It's in those experiences. If you go, even as a way for vacation or holiday to get away and get some, rest and relaxation, terrific. You're probably in a better mode then to be open to new ideas and how things apply. Jennifer Johnson sure was. She didn't go to Hawaii looking for a solution for her hospital. She went to Hawaii to get away from the hospital for a week.
Yeah.
And she was there, checked into the hotel less than an hour, and she had the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I had something similar to Jennifer. I went with my family to Grenada, and we went with a team or students, and we were the chaperones. Went for the games, and I'm there, away from the job, relaxing and talking to the personnel at the hotel, and I was, talking to the accountant for the hotel, and finding out his background, where he's from, learned that he went to school in Jamaica, and we started talking, and he left something with me I never forgot, and this was a few years back, and he said, how I remain successful and keep this business running is to always ensure that I take care of my team. Anything that my team puts on my desk, I make sure to get that out of the way. If they're waiting on something, I don't let them wait. I make sure they have everything they need to run. So whatever they need, I give it to them so that they can run, because only when they run that, I am successful. So I don't let them wait on something that that is important for their next step. I ensure that anything that is needed is done. And I was like, wow. And this is on vacation. And numerous times, that's always when, as I said, when you're relaxed, that these thinking come in, but we have to capture them and act on them.
Right. But it's stuck with you for years now, right? And
yes.
And that is a lesson that can be applied in any industry. Yes. A good leader, there's a book called Leaders Eat Last, and it's a book from a military, it came from someone, I think it was in the Navy SEALs. But the point of it is, as a leader, we care for our people and we put them first in order to achieve things. And so when it comes to peripheral thinking, this is a lesson that you don't want to keep to yourself. If you're a COO or a leader of your organization, you don't want to keep this message to yourself. You want to encourage your people to watch Tamar's podcasts, to learn, and to go out and find new things. Because then when your team really has an expansive set of professional and personal experiences, when you do that 360-degree review, if they're smart, they're taking the perspectives of other people with them. And now you've expanded. And that 360-degree review is truly a view from a lot of different perspectives.
Wow. Thank you for that, Paul. Yeah. And we're wrapping up our interview, and just wanted to ask you to step into my shoes for a little bit. Is there any question that I should have asked that I didn't?
How I've maintained my handsome good looks for so long.
And look like you're under 40. Yes, please let us know. Yeah, waking up at 4:30 a.m. every morning. That's one.
Yep, 4:30 every morning. Get a run in. be at the office by 6, and use the best time of the day for you to get your best work done. You've asked some terrific questions. I truly do love your podcast and the people that you've had on, and I think your audience is outstanding, and they need the help. They want the help. So you've asked all the questions. If you ask more, I'll just continue talking. And I know we've got a time limit, so we'll stop there.
But I still have one last question I'm going to pop in. And, ask every guest in your career. I believe in the power of questions. Let me say that. I think, you get the best outcomes from, asking great questions. In your career, Paul, what is one question that you frequently use when you're working with teams to get the best outcomes?
It's what if. So when working with teams, typically I'll get a response that is common. It's conventional, it's plan your work your plan kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I say, well, what if you had access to different resources? What would that do? Well, like what kind of resources? I don't know. You decide. What if you knew with confidence that the answers for your questions aren't just out there, they're just right here. They're just on the other side of that desk. It's just outside that door. It's not around the world. Sure, if you need justification to go to Hawaii for a vacation or a business trip, quote me. That's fine. But the answers are truly everywhere. So the what if, instead of I don't think it's there, but what if it was there? And it changes that perspective to say, okay, well, maybe it is there. Well, if it is there, then what if? Well, then I need to go get it. Right. Let's go get it.
Wow. That will definitely expand the periphery by asking those what if questions. And then when I think of what if, I go back to my college days as an engineer and drawing those decision trees and saying an if then else.
Yes.
And it just branches out and expands the more if statements they are. So I really love that question. I think that one is a first for this podcast. So thank you for sharing that. Paul.
Lucky 13.
Yes. Right. It has been so much fun.
Oh, the pleasure's mine.
You have shared so much wealth of information with us today. For those listening, please just look at the show notes and we will put all the links to all the things that we have mentioned here. We want to thank Paul for being here, and we want to thank our listeners for listening in, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion just as we did, and share in the comments what you like most from this episode. You can also continue the conversation with Paul to learn more about how peripheral thinking can help your organization, or to book Paul to speak at your next event. Please go to www.pauldanielsjr.com. And again, the link will be in the show notes, and select the contact or hold the date tabs. You will be in for a treat, as you can hear from this discussion, right? I hope that everyone will set new standards for success with this information, and I want to hear all about it. So you can reach out to me at tamarnelson.com or on LinkedIn at Tamar-Nelson if you want to share, if you want to be a guest, or any suggestions you may have, please share them with me. I would love to hear from you. And, leave a review on our rating on Apple Podcast, and do join us again for another information-packed episode. Stay curious, continually improve. Until next time, and as we say in Jamaica, walk good.